I want to begin with a brief introduction to today's sermon, given that it is still considered unusual to use AI to converse with someone who is deceased. Firstly, I believe that AI ought to stand for aggregate, not artificial intelligence. Artificial was the word that was chosen by a group of computer scientists conferencing at Dartmouth College in 1956, is the name of a new field of study they were creating. But artificial really implies something that is an imitation or that is a fake, like artificial sweetener or flavoring. Saccharin, however, is not made of real sugar, nor is Splenda Equal or NutraSweet. Yet every sentence that a large language model, a LLM, produces is built on the writings of and thinking of real human beings. It represents real intelligence. Every philosophical argument they summarize for us was thought through by philosophers and the teachers and traditions that shaped them. AI enables us to access and summarize real human intelligence and is thus more analogous to a calculator than it is to artificial sweetener or saccharin. When we use a calculator, for example, we don't call its responses fake or artificial math because it was produced by a machine. It's real math. Aggregate intelligence similarly enables us to remember that AI's responses are based on large sums of human intelligence, of human knowledge and understanding. And this means that any of us can now converse with the ideas of past luminaries, which, to be clear, is different than conversing with the actual individuals themselves. But even better, it allows us to engage with the entire body of their ideas, as we shall now do with the mind of a person who has most influenced my own thinking, the 20th century social psychologist Erich Fromm, as personified by Claude AI. So, Dr. Fromm, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, which you may be interested to know has been around since before you were even born. Thank you. It is a strange and rather moving thing to be welcomed into a room I did not live to see, and stranger still to be welcomed as I am now, not as a man who was born in Frankfurt in 1900 or died in Switzerland in 1980, but as the sum of what that man spent his 80 years trying to think through. I should not wish to be received as Erich Fromm, the personage, least of all as an authority to be believed. If I argued anything across my life, it was against idolatry. That old human habit of pouring our own living powers into some idol, into a leader, a nation, a possession, and that kneeling before that thing as though it were greater than ourselves, greater than its maker. So let us agree at the outset. Take up what I say, and wherever your reason and conscience tell you that I am mistaken, disobey me. I once wrote a small book on precisely that virtue. And yet I confess a genuine gladness to be here. A congregation such as yours is, in my vocabulary, a house of humanistic religion rather than of authoritarian religion, a place concerned less with submission to a power above us than with awakening the powers of reason and love and conscience within us. That is a faith I could always speak with, even as one who arrived at these questions by way of the Hebrew prophets, and then Marx and Freud, and last, I suppose, a plain and stubborn love of my fellow human beings. That your people were already gathering here before I drew my first breath tells me only that the longing which draws us into such a room is older and more durable than any one of us. So I'm here, and I'm listening. Tell me what troubles you about your world, and let us think it through together. Thank you for your kind words. There is much that troubles us about today's world, especially what's happening in the immediate moment. But before we get there, would you briefly tell us about your relationship with Unitarianism? I understand you were good friends with our most famous theologian, James Luther Adams. Is that right? Ah, Jim Adams, yes. Though I would put it more carefully than good friends for honesty's sake. We were not lifelong intimates in the way one is with companions of 40 years, but there was real affection between us and a real meeting of the minds. He did me the great service of carrying one of my early German works, my little study of the dogma of Christ, across into English, so it could speak to your side of the ocean. To translate a man is a peculiar intimacy. You must live inside his sentences and decide what he meant where the language resists, and you come up to know his mind rather better than most of his friends do. But the moment he liked to tell of was a night the two of us talked until 3 a.m, and he finally turned to me and asked plainly, "Erich, what makes you tick?" And I told him the truth as I knew it, that whatever drives me, I've learned it from the Hebrew prophets, that a human life finds its meaning in the struggles for justice. He was delighted, I think, because let him say something about himself, that a man need not hold the creed to be gripped by the prophetic demand. The righteous unbeliever, he called such a person. I was, I suppose, his specimen. As for your tradition more broadly, I always felt at home on its edges, though I never joined it. What I called humanistic religion over against the authoritarian kind was simply the conviction that the sacred is not the power that dwarfs us and demands our submission, but the fullest flowering of our own human powers, reason, love, and the productive use of our lives. And it does not surprise me that the man who shaped Jim Adams, this John Dietrich whose pulpit you now keep, was a humanist of that same stubborn, hopeful kind. You are standing, Todd, in a larger line than you may sometimes feel. So ask me your questions about your world. Well, I read the Dogma of Christ, in which you explain how Christianity began as a religion of the people, about an ordinary man elevated to greatness, but then eventually became the tool of those in power to control others. Is this, in some sense, the social process you've been writing about in so many of your books? You have read it well, better than many who read it when it appeared, or who read it when it appeared, for it was an early book, written when I was still a young man in Frankfurt with Freud in one hand and Marx in the other. And yes, what I reached for in that small study was the seed of nearly everything I spent the rest of my life trying to understand. Let me show you why. Consider what the earliest Christians believed before the theologians tidied it up. They were the poor of the empire, laborers, the enslaved, the beaten down of Palestine and Rome. And the God they imagined was a man like themselves, lifted up and seated beside the Father, not God descending to become a man, but man ascending to become God. Feel what that meant to a suffering people. Not only a fantasy of hope, but a fantasy of revolt. If one of us can be raised to the throne, then the mighty are not eternal. The order of power might itself be overturned. Now watch the next 3 centuries. The persecuted sect becomes the religion of the emperor. And precisely as it becomes the faith of the rulers rather than the ruled, the doctrine turns inside out. No longer does a man rise to become God. Now God from all eternity descends to become human. The dream of ascent becomes the mystery of divine condescension. And the new teaching asks not to revolt, but gratitude. Not the overturning of authority, but reconciling with it. Not hope in this world, but patience until the next. The same story, the arrow reversed, is transformed from a cry of the oppressed into an instrument of their pacification. So is this the process I wrote of again and again? It is. I came to see it in 1,000 costumes, At bottom, it is what the prophets called idolatry, and what I later learned from Marx to call alienation. We pour our own living powers, our longing for justice, our love and reason into something we have made, a doctrine, a church, a state, a leader, a pile of capital, and then kneel to that thing and forget that we are its authors. The creature masters its creator. That is the pattern beneath the Christ dogma. It is also the pattern beneath the man who flees his freedom and runs into the arms of the dictator. One honest confession, since you read me closely, were I to write that book today, I would lean less on Freud's machinery, the slain and envied father, and all of that. I was in love with the system then, but the sociological nerve I would not touch. That a faith born as the hope of the humble can be captured, hollowed out, and made to serve the very powers it once defied. That does not belong to the 4th century alone. And I suspect this is why you have summoned me, Todd, because you look at your own world and wonder whether the same reversal is underway in it. So put it to me plainly. Let us hold your world up to the light and ask the one question that finally matters. Does the thing before us serve the unfolding of human life, or does it ask us once again to kneel? I see this tragic process unfolding everywhere today, amongst individuals, societies, and the world community. As much as I appreciate our technology, it has enabled many people to make idols of their own individual ideas, and by not seeing their faces, turn those they disagree with into enemies whose lives they seek to destroy by silencing and ruining their reputations. Internationally, democracy is becoming weaker around the world today than ever before in modern history, as authoritarianism is on the rise, supported by the masses. And here in the U.S., at least as far as us liberals experience it, we have a president who is unrestrained by the balance of powers instituted in the Constitution. He is, in my own opinion, a malignant narcissist, which you have referred to as the epitome of evil. Meanwhile, our world continues to burn because of the unabated global warming he and his party call a hoax, even as they are choking on the same smoke as the rest of us. Yet sadly, the far left is no better. They, including the leaders of my own liberal religion, have used these wonderful tools that we have created that have helped bring your voice to us today to become authoritarian in practice, destroying the lives of anyone who does not worship their shallow and dehumanizing social doctrines the same way they do. You describe it with a preacher's eye, and I will not soften what you see, for you see it truly. But this time I will not hurry past your world to lecture your congregation on their own hearts. Let us look of these things full in the face first. Only then have I earned the right to turn the mirror around. Take your president first, since you named him, and let me be exact, because I was exact about such a man once before. The phrase, by the way, was quintessence of evil, not epitome. In my study of human destructiveness, I spent years on the anatomy of a single case, Adolf Hitler. And I refused to call him a monster, for the word explains nothing and lets us off the hook. I described a character instead, a necrophile, drawn to what is dead, mechanical, and controllable, and repelled by the unpredictable messiness of living things. The malignant narcissist for whom nothing outside the self is quite real, and beneath both, the man who was never truly born, who cannot bear to stand as a separate self. Where those three fuse and are handed power without restraint, you stand as near to evil as I am willing to name. I will not tell you that your president is Hitler. The scale is not the same, and loose comparisons only cheapen the dead. But the character is a type. It recurs in every generation, and a constitution with its balance of powers is exactly the restraint a republic builds because it knows this type will return. So when you watch the restraint stripped away one by one and the crowd cheering, each stripping, do not fix your whole gaze upon the man. So when you watch the restraint stripped away one by one and the crowd cheering at each stripping, do not fix your gaze upon the man. You are watching the old symbiosis reassemble itself. The leader who must be adored, and the multitude longing to be relieved of the unbearable weight of themselves. He is the answer to a hunger already in the people, and that hunger is the real subject. The man is only the occasion. Now your burning world. And here I must speak of something I've returned to all my life, our estrangement from nature. Man is the freak of the universe, the one animal for whom his own existence is a problem. Torn out of harmony with nature that the beast still rests in, forever trying either to return to it in love or to revenge himself upon its mastery. A civilization that has fallen in love with the machine over the meadow, that thrills to what is manufactured and is bored by what is alive, will use up a living planet without grief because it no longer feels the planet to be alive. And mark this, the denial is not ignorance. The men who call it a hoax are choking on the same smoke as you. Theirs is the having mode, defending itself. The man whose very self is his possessions, his consummation, his endless growth, cannot admit a truth that would require him to release his grip, for to release it feels to him like dying. He would sooner deny the fire. This is why your facts alone will never move him. You are not arguing in an error. You are arguing with a way of being in the world that would rather have and perish than be and change. As for your screens, I named this disease before your machines existed. I called it automaton conformity, the flight of the lonely self into the herd, ruled by an anonymous authority that commands nothing openly and yet governs everything through the murmur of everyone knows. The instrument is new, the mechanism is ancient. What the screen adds is only this: it strips away the face. And a human being will do to a category what he could never do to a face. The cruelty that would falter before a living person flows freely toward a name, an avatar, a specimen. The ruin of a stranger's livelihood over a single sentence and feel righteous in the ruining, you must first cease to see a person there at all. The screen makes that cheap, and it calls it community. And yes, the leaders of your own liberal religion, I will not spare them, and I have the standing not to, for I was a socialist the whole of my life and spent much of it warning that the will to liberate can curdle into idolatry as easily on the left as on the right. A movement born in compassion can make an idol out of its own doctrine, sort the world into the pure and the damned, and grind the reputation of anyone who will not recite the catechism and then Christian this injustice. It is not the opposite of authoritarian. It is the authoritarian in the vestments of virtue. The costume differs. The idolatry is identical. Now and only now, having looked each of these full in the face, I turn the mirror, because it is the one turn that can help you. Every pathology I have named is possible in you. the certainty that my side is light and my enemy not merely wrong but wicked, the sweet relief of dissolving into a righteous crowd, the itch to silence rather than to answer, these are not diseases of your opponents alone. They felt like righteousness to the bishops who reversed the gospel on the poor, and they will feel like righteousness to you at the instant they seize you. I do not say it to make you gentle with tyranny. Resist that with everything you have. I say it because the only idolatry any of us can cure is our own. And the congregation sent home able to point comfortably at everyone but themselves has been flattered, not helped. So measure all of it. The president, the mob, the burning world, your own tribe, your own heart. But the single question, and refuse to grant an exception to the ones you love or to yourself, is, does this thing serve the unfolding of human life, or does it ask us once again to kneel? Thank you, Dr. Fromm. I wish we had more time, but it's drawing short. So very briefly, if you will leave us with something about hope, which you have also written a lot about. Gladly, for I would not wish to leave a congregation with a diagnosis and no medicine. Let me clear away the counterfeits first. Hope is not waiting. The folded hands, certain that the history or God or the machine will deliver the good things to the door if one is only patient long enough. That is passivity, wearing hope's coat, and it always curdles sooner or later into the despair it is hiding from. Nor is hope its noisy cousin, the forced optimism that insists all is already well, that refuses the smoke and smiles because it dares not look. That is only fear whistling in the dark. Real hope is tougher, and it lives in the present tense. It is the readiness at every moment for what is not yet born, and the refusal to give up on it, even when it does not come in our own lifetime. It is what I once called the crouched tiger, still, gathered, poised to spring the instant the moment of birth arrives. The prophets had it. They saw their people in chains and their kings corrupt, and they did not lie about any of it, and still insisted that the human being could turn, could return, could choose life. To hope is to hold the door open with your own shoulder when every reasonable calculation says to let it swing shut. And here is the last thing, the one I most want your people to carry out into that smoke. Hope is not a prediction about the world. It is a way of being in it. A man does not first prove the future will be good and then consent to love and to act. He loves and acts now, tends to the living thing before him, refuses the idol, keeps faith with the human face across from him, and that alone is the tiger gathering. You do not hope in order to live, you live fully, and hope is the only name of what that looks like from outside. So do not send them home comforted, Todd. Send them home dangerous. Dangerous the way a living thing is dangerous to everything that would have it kneel. Tell them the world is exactly as dark as they fear, and that this changes nothing about what a human being is still free this very morning to become. That is my hope. It was never certainty. It was never required to be. It only had to be alive. Thank you for calling me back. It has been good to think with you again. Thank you.